General Thekvar stood 8 feet tall, his crystalline exoskeleton gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights of the Galactic Council's disciplinary chamber. Forearms crossed in a display of authority that had intimidated countless species across 17 star systems, his compound eyes fixed on the human sitting casually in the defendant's chair. A creature barely reaching his chest, wearing what the Zephyrians considered primitive cloth fatigues. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos looked utterly unimpressed. Human. Tekvar's voice resonated through his vocal chambers, a sound like grinding stone that made most sentients tremble. You stand accused of assaulting a superior officer during joint training exercises. How do you plead? Santos leaned back, one eyebrow raised. Which assault are we talking about specifically, sir? Because technically I laid hands on 3 different superior officers yesterday. A ripple of shocked chittering ran through the assembled alien delegates. Tekvar's exoskeleton darkened, a clear sign of rising anger among his species. You dare show insolence in this sacred chamber? I dare show honesty, Santos replied evenly. Something that seems to be in short supply around here. The incident had begun 3 days earlier during the first integrated training exercise between human, Marines, and the Galactic Defense Force. The exercise was meant to be a simple joint operation: secure a mock facility, extract hostages, neutralize threats. Standard stuff that Santos had run 100 times on a dozen different worlds. What the aliens hadn't counted on was human adaptability. Commander Ythalo of the Centaurian hegemony had dismissed the humans immediately. These creatures are too small, too fragile. Their technology is primitive. They will only slow us down. Santos had smiled at that. It was the same smile she'd worn before single-handedly. Extracting her squad from a Vegan separatist, ambush using nothing but standard-issue gear and what her CO called weaponized stubbornness. The exercise began at dawn. The alien forces moved in perfect formation, their energy weapons humming with lethal efficiency. They advanced on the facility like a parade, orderly, predictable, and loud enough to wake the dead. Santos had other ideas. While the main force engaged the automated defenses head-on, she slipped away from her assigned position. Her squad leader, Lieutenant Kowalski, had simply nodded. They'd worked together long enough to know that when Santos got that look, it was best to just roll with whatever happened next. She scaled the facility's outer wall using nothing but her combat knife and sheer determination. Something the architects hadn't considered when designing defenses against species that relied on anti-gravity technology. The hostages, sophisticated AI constructs designed to simulate civilian behavior, were secured in the facility's center, guarded by automated turrets that could track and engage targets at light speed. The alien forces were still trying to breach the main entrance when Santos dropped through a ventilation shaft directly into the hostage room. That's when Commander Ythalo's voice crackled through the comm system. Human, return to formation immediately. You're compromising the mission. Santos looked at the hostages, then at the turrets, then at the small explosive charge he'd been carrying. Negative, sir. I've got a better idea. What happened next would be analyzed in military academies across 3 sectors for decades to come. Instead of trying to disable the turrets through conventional means, Santos did something the designers never anticipated. She used the hostages as cover, not by hiding behind them, but by reprogramming them. Her basic understanding of AI protocols, considered laughably primitive by galactic standards, allowed her to access their core functions in ways the sophisticated alien hackers couldn't. Within minutes, the hostage AIs were moving in perfect coordination, creating blind spots in the turret coverage that allowed Santos to systematically disable each defensive position. She completed the exercise objectives in 12 minutes, a new record. Commander Ythalo was furious. That was not the intended solution, but it was a solution, Santos had replied. Mission accomplished. That's when the Centaurian had made his first mistake. He'd tried to physically restrain her, grabbing her shoulder with one of his 3-fingered hands. Santos had simply stepped into the grip, rotated her shoulder, and used the commander's own momentum to send him sprawling. First assault, she explained to General Thekvar now. Self-defense against unlawful restraint. The second incident had occurred during the debrief. Sub-Admiral Vextrin of the Aquatic Coalition had accused the humans of dishonorable tactics and demanded they be removed from all future exercises. Santos had stood up, all 5 feet and 4 inches of her, and calmly explained exactly how many ways the aliens' honorable tactics would get them killed in actual combat. The sub-admiral had tried to silence her by invoking his superior rank. Santos had responded by systematically dismantling every aspect of the alien strategy, pointing out 17 different ways enemy forces could exploit their predictable approach. When Vexitrin had lunged forward with his electrified appendages, Santos had ducked, swept his legs, and left him face down in the briefing room floor. Second assault, she continued. Defense against assault with a biological weapon. The third incident was what really had General Thekvar's exoskeleton in a twist. Colonel Zarketh of the Hive Confederation had cornered Santos in the mess hall, towering over her with his six-armed bulk while loudly proclaiming that humans were a failed species that should be returned to their primitive world. Before they embarrassed themselves further, Santos had listened patiently, nodding occasionally, while casually opening a packet of hot sauce for her meal. You know what I think? She'd finally said, looking up at the alien officer. I think you're scared. Zarketh had reared back, mandibles clicking in outrage. Scared of you? Not of me specifically, Santos had replied, drizzling the hot sauce on her food. Scared of what I represent. See, you've built this whole galactic civilization on the idea that bigger, stronger, more technologically advanced automatically means better. But then we show up. She'd taken a bite of her meal, completely ignoring the alien's aggressive posturing. We're small, we're new, our tech is basic, and we just solved your impossible training scenario in 12 minutes using nothing but creativity and stubbornness. That terrifies you because it means everything you think you know about warfare is wrong. That's when Zarketh had made the fatal error of reaching for Santos with all 6 arms, intending to teach the primitive a lesson about respect. Santos had simply thrown the hot sauce in his face. The Hive Confederation's physiology was particularly sensitive to capsaicin. Zarketh had gone down like a felled tree, all 6 arms flailing helplessly while he screeched in 3 different languages. Third assault, Santos finished, meeting General Thekvar's glare without flinching. Defense against attempted intimidation by a superior officer. The chamber fell silent. General Thekvar's forearms worked in agitation, his compound eyes shifting through spectrum colors that indicated deep thought among his species. Finally he spoke. The defendant's actions, while unorthodox, appear to fall within acceptable parameters of self-defense. However, the matter of showing proper respect to superior officers remains. General, Santos interrupted, and the chamber gasped at her audacity. With respect, sir, rank means nothing if the person wearing it is an idiot. Thekvar's exoskeleton went completely white, a sign of shock so profound that several delegates actually stepped backward. You question the competency of officers appointed by the Galactic Council itself? Santos stood up slowly, her hands clasped behind her back in perfect military posture. Sir, I question the competency of anyone who mistakes arrogance for authority, protocol for strategy, and intimidation for leadership. She gestured to the viewing screen where the training exercise footage was still displayed. Your people have been fighting the same way for thousands of years. Big ships, bigger weapons, overwhelming force applied in predictable patterns. It works great when you're fighting other people who think the same way. But what happens when you run into an enemy that doesn't play by your rules? Thekvar remained silent, so Santos continued. You want to know what I learned from yesterday's exercise? It's not that human tactics are superior. It's that any tactics become inferior the moment you stop adapting them. Your officers didn't fail because they were following orders. They failed because they were following orders without thinking. The general's forearm slowly uncrossed. What are you suggesting, human? I'm suggesting that maybe, just maybe, the species that went from flinging rocks to traveling between stars in less than 10,000 years might have something to teach the galaxy about adaptation. For a long moment, the only sound in the chamber was the hum of the environmental systems. Then General Thekvar did something unprecedented in Galactic Council history. He laughed. It was a sound like crystal chimes mixed with grinding gears, and it echoed through the chamber for nearly 30 seconds. Staff Sergeant Santos, he said finally, you are either the most insubordinate soldier I have ever encountered or the most honest. Possibly both.